Jeff T. Bowles, welcome back to the podcast, Jeff. Before I ask you how you are, let me just do a little quick intro. Hopefully, everybody, you have listened to myself and Jeff's first podcast conversation that we had before Christmas, which was absolutely riveting. And this one is going to be equally as good. So, if you don't know who Jeff is, Jeff began a series of ebooks which became bestsellers, and he published them specifically addressing health issues that conventional medicine is just completely overlooking, and even the literature. And he wanted to help people deal with the problem of healing and aging from an evolutionary perspective. So then, as time went on, he started to join what we call a simple logic of evolution with a large number of diverse facts, and as well as the results of his 25-year-old private research. Jeff has been able to demonstrate a wide range of new, simple, and very effective ways to relieve many chronic diseases such as multiple sclerosis, asthma, and age-related diseases like Alzheimer's and ALS. He has even wrote a book on cancer and a new one on cardiovascular disease. Jeff was the first person who could show in a rat experiment that rats whose water intake was restricted live significantly longer, even longer than when they're restricted food. And in 1998, in the Journal of Medicine Hypotheses, his article, The Evolution of Aging, A New Approach to an Old Problem of Biology, was published. And I'm sure you'll all figure out that Jeff is one of those hidden gems and unknown geniuses by the time you get to the end of this podcast. Jeff, welcome back. How are you?
Oh, fine. Thanks for that intro. You didn't mention that one water restricted rat actually set the world record for the rat strain and sex. The female Sprague Dolly set the world record by a large margin for lifespan extension. She lived 47 months, and the world record for caloric restricted rats of her strain and sex, but by then was 36 months. And I only did water restriction in 2 rats, so that was a little more impressive than it sounded in your intro.
Oh, I'm sorry, but that video of that female rat is up on your YouTube channel, and it's quite striking to see that growth on the side of her and then just falls off, and people go check
Oh, then
it
that
out.
was one of the control rats. That was a different part of the study. It was just like one of the control rats got a large tumor, like right about the size of half a golf ball, like right where her front arm connects to her body. I guess it was a breast tumor. I don't know, but it was big. And I tried to cure that by cutting off her calories. I was thinking evolution would know which cells to eat.
Hmm.
If it was going to starve to death, it would sacrifice the cancer cells. And that didn't work. I cut her food off until she lost 30% of her weight. Then I let her eat again, did it several times. It didn't work, but maybe it primed the pump. And I said, wait a minute, what if I cut off her water? So I cut off her water, and just within 3 or 4 days, that tumor just went boom and imploded down to nothing. It was
Mhm.
quite dramatic. And it stayed that way for like the human equivalent of, about 20 years, like 6 months in rat time is like 20 years human. And that tumor shrunk down to about the size of like a little penny under her skin. But it finally came back when she got really old. And then I couldn't get rid of it with the water restriction. There's probably something changed. But now I know how to cure cancer or kill cancer easily. I wrote a book about it. It's a 3-pronged attack, an all-fat diet. Cancer cells can't use fat for energy very well. And then high-dose vitamin D3 will reactivate cancer-suppressed DNA repair genes, and it'll tell the cells to either become normal or self-destruct. And then the third prong is dehydration, just like for up to 5 or 7 days, because cancer cells are actually like our ancient evolved single cell ancestors that lived in the oceans. So
Mhm.
they can't handle drought, but our land animal cells can handle drought easily. So that's why that water restriction killed her tumor. But that's just an aside. We're going to talk about something else completely different, right?
So you just mentioned one of your books. Well, you have a new book out, which is why I invited you back on the podcast. And we had kind of touched on this in the last conversation. So your new book is called The Winter Gene. Which I wasn't actually surprised that that was going to be the title because we again discussed it a little bit on the last conversation. But really, just when I thought you couldn't come out with any more information, you just knock it out of the park with this one, and then you tell me you have yet another book on the way. There's like no stopping you. You put the rest of us to shame.
Well, once you start pulling on the thread, it just keeps unraveling. So I was just pulling on the winter gene thread when we've talked last time. And then since I told you I was writing a book, and then during the research, it's like the thread just completely unraveled. So there's a lot more interesting stuff now. Because I think we just talked earlier about the autoimmune diseases kept women in the cave, and
Yeah, we were talking
hunter
about,
diseases.
we discussed
Yeah, the
seasonal
men get
affective disorder as well.
and then men get hunter diseases from the ice age. Like everything we call disease is ice age adaptation. So men get stuff that helps them from freezing to death, like high blood sugar, like that's for type 2 diabetes, and then high triglycerides. Triglycerides a sugar too. It's like 3 glycerins. High LDL cholesterol that goes into your cell membranes and makes them more freezing resistant. And then high pressure in the eye and blood that lowers the freezing point of blood. And then calcified arteries, they protect the arteries from freezing and crystallizing, and also allow for higher pressure to go through the veins. And then you get heart failure, where your heart starts to get bigger. And that happens in athletes too. And then it goes back to a normal size after they're done exercising for a while. So that's what heart failure is. Your heart keeps getting bigger and bigger, and then starts to get so big it gets weaker and you can't pump the blood as much. And so that was actually an adaptation of a stronger heart in the winter, and that never gets shut off because we don't give ourselves the summer signal anymore in modern day life. So we've got all these ice age adaptations, and we call them diseases.
But
But they actually help us survive.
Jeff, this is these are what you referred to as the caveman's diseases in your new book.
Yeah, the AI wanted me to use caveman disease on my first cover, and then I later changed it to the winter gene. So I really called it a human hibernation syndrome, but you can call it caveman syndrome if you want.
So, okay, let's start from the start. So, what is the winter gene? And then to follow up on that, why are humans nowadays stuck in hibernation mode, regardless of the time of the year?
Well, winter gene's actually a misnomer. AI said it would be the best way to market the book, but it's actually many genes, not just one. Call them winter genes. And it turns out 900,000 years ago, humans had to live, cave humans, or kind of like pre-humans, had to survive about 117,000 year massive ice age, where supposedly only 12 or 1,300 breeding humans actually were able to survive for 117,000 years, like kept reproducing through that time. So it's a real bottleneck. So the only ones that are going to survive had to adapt, had to create various protections against freezing, and also adaptations to help them hunt in the ice age. So men got the hunter diseases, and women get the caveman diseases. So that's basically where the genes come from. And you can, by looking at sex ratios of diseases, I figured out which genes are, which which diseases are adaptations for which sex. So women get like all these autoimmune diseases, like 4-to-1, 10-to-1, 25-to-1. And the one thing they all have in common is they cause fatigue. They make her like they give her also weird diseases like Crohn's, where you have to stay by the bathroom, or MS, where you can't walk, or there's all sorts of different rheumatoid arthritis. And then there's even lupus. Now that's the same sex ratio across all races. So that one evolved with a specific purpose. And that one's different because lupus is like 10-to-1 in women in all races. And they all get the same problem. They're allergic to the sun. So that really keeps them in the cave. But so all these autoimmune diseases, and it's to force the women to stay in the cave and stay safe. So then the stuff that men get at a higher rate, like type 2 diabetes, heart failure, hypertension, high cholesterol, and then those are all, they help the men not freeze to death out in the winter. And then what happens then is their blood sugar goes up, triglycerides go up, that low, and even the LDL circulating in the blood helps to lower the freezing point of blood. And as we mentioned earlier, the glaucoma, high pressure in the eyes and blood, that lowers the freezing point. But so men get all these ice age survival, like hunter survival genes when they're out there tracking down the mammoths. Mm-hmm. And then I found one disease that didn't make sense to me at first. It was glaucoma. You would think that would be a higher ratio in men, because they got to go out and hunt, and their eyes would freeze because the fluid doesn't circulate in the eyes very well. So that's why you'd have to put pressure in there and sugar as antifreeze protectants. But the sex ratio is 1-to-1. And then I looked at it. Women get a different kind of glaucoma than men at a much higher rate. Women get, this was like the thing, like, wow, this is definitely, everything makes sense. This confirms that the theory's correct. Women get narrow angle glaucoma, and that's like, I don't know, the pressure narrows right around her pupil or iris and somehow blocks fluid from getting out of that area. And it's triggered when women go into dark places. So there you go. That's definitely caveman. And then men get a much higher wide angle glaucoma, and that's just a gradual buildup of pressure in the eyes over time from reduced drainage. So that would help him out there in the winter hunting mammoths. So I said, there's the smoking gun. And so that kind of like, but then there's a whole nother set of mental diseases and we got all these antifreeze diseases. A lot of them come from Neanderthal genes in Europeans. So Europeans have a lot of Neanderthal genes, and a lot of them were these diseases that like Crohn's, hypertension, this and that. And then there's a whole nother set of mental diseases that, like schizophrenia, autism, anorexia nervosa, obsessive compulsive disorder. And the sex ratios tell the same story in the mental diseases, but we can get into that unless you later.
And there's just the basics as well, where we see in the winter people's anxiety and depression and malaise and just feeling of like low mood, and that all increases. And we discussed in the last conversation how Dr. Broda Barnes had connected low thyroid function being a cause of seasonal affective disorder, and then we had connected the dots that, well, that would make sense because vitamin D is a thyroid hormone, and that's why people feel better when they take more vitamin D in the winter, especially in regards to their mental health.
Yeah, vitamin D is not really a thyroid hormone, but it's very similar in its effect, because I looked up D3 versus deficiency symptoms versus thyroid, I think T4 deficiency symptoms. And there was basically the same list. And D3 and thyroid receptors, sometimes they cleave off, and half a receptor of D3 pairs up with half a receptor of thyroid, so they're totally interconnected. But I think you could probably just reverse all those symptoms taking either D3 or thyroid. I don't think you really have to take both.
You mentioned something a few minutes ago that I'd love to circle back to. You mentioned being allergic to the sun. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that?
Oh yeah, so have you ever heard of that singer in England named Seal?
Yeah, yeah.
He's got he's
He
got
was
those
married to
scars on his
that
face.
supermodel, yeah.
Yeah, and he's got those scars on his face, and I thought he had like some kind of violent encounter, maybe with
With a nuclear power plant.
no, it's like the police or criminals or something. And it turns out that he's got lupus. Men don't get it very often, but
Mm.
so the sun will exaggerate those nasty things on their face. And it turns out a lady read my vitamin D3 book, my first one. She had lupus, where she was allergic to the sun. And, when you go out, it gives you those weird marks on your face, and the hair falls out. And I think you're very tired. All the autoimmune diseases include fatigue. So that's kind of the common theme amongst all of them, to keep you tired and in the cave.
That's interesting
Fibromyalgia,
because
everything.
it's interesting because I have two clients here that have lupus, and theirs seems to be more pain associated, and they absolutely love the sun. They have beautiful tans, but they don't get any skin conditions. So it must not be everyone. Is it something maybe that's more prevalent in men, the skin conditions with lupus?
No, no. Women get it 10-1. Are you clients men or women?
Women, two women.
Oh, okay. Well, if they're taking enough D3, all that stuff goes away. So I don't know if they're taking D3. And so eventually, if you get enough sun, it'll get rid of all the lupus symptoms. So
Yeah.
it's only triggered when they're D3 deficient.
So
So,
in
so
the
it keeps them in the cave. It keeps them in the cave in the winter. So
yeah, well, you don't need to
that's when,
do much convincing of that
huh?
here in said you don't need to do much convincing of that here in Canada. We're happy to stay in the cave.
Oh, right. Yeah. So I was telling you about this lady. She read my first book. She had lupus, and she said she was allergic to the sun. But once she started taking just 10,000 units a day, every day, she said all her lupus stuff reversed. And then Dr. Coimbra's got he does a high dose D3 protocol for every autoimmune disease, and he's got like a before and after pictures of lupus patients, like completely cured with high dose D3.
So we'll call it the winter gene concept of your book. You claim that most modern diseases like obesity, heart disease, cancer, and so on, they're actually features of an ancient survival program, what we're referring to as the winter gene, rather than actual biological malfunctions. So we've already
Right.
connected the dots there that this is a drop in D3 because D3 acts as the master signal that tells our DNA, hey, 100,000 year ice age has arrived. Hello, here's a
Right,
boatload
right.
of diseases and symptoms for you.
Well, there's also two other season signals that don't really affect the DNA so much, but they affect your body. Although vitamin K2 might affect the DNA, because people that take a lot of K2 have a 60% reduction in cancer, along with people with a lot of D3. So if you take them together, you should almost never get cancer. And then magnesium is a summer signal, because when you're in the cave, you're not out eating fresh green leafy vegetables or plant material.
Mhm.
And so you become magnesium deficient. And then if you're eating animal products. The animal products only have vitamin K2 in them when they've been eating summer grass. So every season the magnesium levels go down and K2 goes down and D3 goes down in the winter, and then they all come back up in the summer. And so what happens then, it turns out 80% of us are all magnesium deficient, and almost all of us are vitamin K2 deficient because they started feeding corns to cows. So there's like very little K2 in the food supply anymore. And the magnesium, the soil magnesium content has been like plowed out of existence. And now they use phosphate fertilizers and nitrogen instead of putting magnesium back into the soil, because everything grows faster with that. But all the foods are magnesium deficient. So we used to get like a seasonal increase in D3, K2, and magnesium in the summer months, and then they would all go down in the winter months. And when they go down, that's how your arteries start to calcify. And because vitamin K2 pulls calcium out of your soft tissues and puts it in your bones. But then when it goes down, it kind of operates in reverse. It comes out of your bones and goes into your soft tissues, but that's actually going to protect you from the upcoming freeze. And then, but with these days, we never get they told us in the 1980s to start using sunscreen, stay out of the sun, no tan is safe. And that since 1980, everything's been skyrocketing. And that's, because of a D3 crash in the population. And that's what's driving obesity. It's not these seed oils or processed foods. That's just a red herring. And I can prove that just if you look at the obesity map of the United States, you'll see it proves that D3 is the cause of obesity, because black people, areas with large amounts of black people, they're all obese. Indian reservations, they're all obese. And then there's white people are obese, but only in Appalachia. That's those low-lying mountains that are only 3,000 feet tall. They live down in the shadows. They call them the hollows. And so they don't get much sun during the day. So that's why they're obese. And then there's this one state it's almost like there's no obesity relatively. I wrote a book called Why Are There No Fat People in Colorado? And that's because they live up high in the mountains. Oh, we talked about this last time, but
I was
they
at
get
the
much
very
stronger.
end. Yeah.
Yeah, they get much stronger UVB in higher altitudes. Once you get up like 5,000 to 10,000 feet, the UVB is much stronger. So even though there's mountain shadows, that stronger UVB rays make up for it. And that's why there's no fat people in Colorado.
Sorry, I was going to say, because you mentioned like supplementation and from the 1980s on, but what about the 1920s supplement rush that you mentioned in the new book? Can you touch on that a bit?
Oh yeah. So actually I have a YouTube channel, Jeff T. Bowles, and I've been doing AI songs, and one of my most popular is called the sunscreen scam. If you listen to that, it starts off with talks about in the 1920s, they just had discovered vitamin D and they're putting in everything. They called it the sunshine vitamin. People were taking like up to 25 milligrams a day, and then they just built a bunch of hospitals for profit. Medicine used to be done in the house with the doctor in his little black bag, but they're planning on bringing it into these for-profit hospitals and make a lot of money. But everyone's popping all this vitamin D. Nobody's getting sick. So they panic, must have gone into a cigar smoke-filled back room and came up with a great plan. Let's change 25 milligrams. We'll call it 1 million international units. And then we'll tell everyone, don't take more than 400 units a day or it's dangerous. And so everyone started believing them, and that's how we got the 400 IU daily dose. Now the Institute of Medicine has only bumped it up to 600, which is a bare tiny fraction of what adult humans need. They came up with 400 IUs. It was just enough to keep a baby from getting rickets, which is bow
Mm-hmm.
legs,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing more. It wasn't optimized for health. It was just enough so babies didn't get rickets. And so we've been since 1941, the Institute of Medicine made that the standard daily dose. And we were always warned, never take any more than that. And doctors are taught in medical school, no, don't take it. D3 is very toxic. Don't ever take much more than that. But it turns out if you just sunbathe, just a normal light-skinned person sunbathing for a half hour, like at the Canada-U.S. border, they're going to make about 20,000 IUs of D3 in their skin.
Mm.
It's just totally corrupt that they did this. And then in 1997, they even dropped it down to 200 IUs a day. I guess they weren't getting enough business. And then finally in 2011, they bumped it back up but only to 600 IUs a day. And that's where it stands now. The Institute of Medicine has not corrected that dose. And 2 other studies came out from a few years later. They said the IOM made a decimal point error. So they made the recommended dose accidentally, quote unquote, too low by 90%. And they never came out and fixed that error. It's still there. They changed their name to something else, but it's still the recommended daily allowance, which is criminal. And the woman, there were 2 people on that committee in 2011 that said you should only take 600 IUs a day. One is Joanne Manson. She's now running the Harvard Vital study, which has like 25,000 people in it. And they're just giving them 2,000 IUs a day, which is still too small.
Mm-hmm.
And she knows it. And now they're finding out, 2,000 IUs a day doesn't help prevent any disease. It doesn't cure this, doesn't help that. Another guy on that IOM committee in 2011 was Clifford Rosen. He is now a editor at the New England Journal of Medicine, and he's putting out editorials and papers like, nobody needs vitamin D3. It's been proven by the Vital study. So and they were both on that committee, and now they're both trying to demonize D3, and they should both be in jail with Dr. Fauci.
Well, we discussed this before we started recording, even that a lot of these big publication systems, shall we call them, a lot of them are manipulated. Like a lot of the research
Oh,
being published and put out now, it can be appealing, it can be eye-catching and have that clickbait title, but a lot of it is a big fat lie. Like it's not true, it's not accurate. They're being paid to manipulate a lot of the research because I can only
oh
guess
yeah,
they don't want us to know the truth.
big pharma's in control of those so-called science journals that are elite, like JAMA, New England Journal of Medicine, Nature, British Medical Journal. You can hear Bruce Hollis talk about it in his YouTube interview with this German interviewer. He says they make him put a black box warning on any studies he wants to do with 4,000 IUs of vitamin D3. Like, this is so dangerous. And then after like going through 10 committees, he gets approval. And then if it says like something's great, like he found 4,000 IUs, like really total reduced the number of prostate tumors in men that were waiting and watching dramatically. And it would be a miracle drug if Big Pharma came up with that. But he submitted it to like those top journals, like, oh, well, no, we can't take this. So he found out that the top journals will not publish anything that makes vitamin D look good, only things that make it look bad. So he had to publish it in
Or
some obscure
useless.
journal.
Yeah.
Huh?
So they'll publish it if it makes it looks bad or useless, like, oh, this isn't an essential
Right,
nutrient.
right.
You
Yeah.
don't really need it.
Or or insignificant. Yeah,
Mm.
during the whole COVID crisis couldn't have been avoided if everyone was taking 10,000 IUs of D3.
Hmm.
Even Fauci knew it. He admitted he takes 7,000 IUs a day, but he had a deal with the vaccine makers and the NIH or wherever he was working. They're getting like $450 million payments from the vaccine makers, which was shared amongst all the scientists. So he was pushing vaccines, and everyone's dying but he wanted to make that money. And I think his net worth went up like 10 million during COVID.
Mm.
So yeah, he definitely belongs in jail. Oh,
You know, on our last
but
video, I do want to get back to the book, but this is actually in your new book. But on the last video in the comments, I don't know if you saw them, but there was a few people that commented on what you kind of had referred to as that 10-year grace period where people like immigrants from equatorial regions, they stay healthy for about 10 years despite moving to low light areas, and then they only start to get sick 10 years later. And there was a couple of people in the comments saying, no, this is not accurate, or they didn't understand what you were saying. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
no,
Because it is in the new
there's a
book.
well they have to look at the study. There's a study out there. I don't know why they're saying it's not true.
I think there was a few of them that were immigrants as well, but I mean, I would be leaning towards even in Canada with the immigrants. I don't think it affected me. I'm an immigrant, but I already came from Ireland. The weather's pretty much just as shit there as it
Right.
is here, and I'm
No,
already Caucasian.
it doesn't apply to people moving across, moving from one latitude to the same latitude. It applies to people that have grown up at the equator, moving up into the north,
There's a
or
lot of
moving far away from the equator.
But
Huh?
also, there's a lot of Middle Eastern people here as well, a lot of people from India. And what I've noticed is that once they kind of get past that 10 to 12-year mark, they start putting on a lot of weight and developing a lot of metabolic diseases as well. So even though they're not necessarily as close to the equator as, say, Mexico or Panama would be, they still get a high
Oh,
exposure of vitamin D.
right. Well, then some of them might have, like Moroccan women were forced to wear like full body covering. So some of them can be D3 deficient down by the equator too. But yeah, and if they have darker skin makes it's much harder to make D3. So, but eventually, after a number of generations up living up north, all the black people and Middle Eastern people, they'll all turn white.
One thing that still
Unless,
kind of deters people, we were speaking
huh?
the other day. So myself and yourself were speaking the other day over emails, and we were discussing high dose vitamin D for fibroids and endometriosis. And the
Right,
studies you had shared with me had women taking 35,000 international units and more and getting complete relief from pain and then regression from tissue buildup over the months. And then I had passed
right.
that along to a few of my clients, and straight away again was what we hear all the time. Oh no, isn't that too
Oh, that's
high?
toxic.
Yeah, isn't that too
Huh?
high? Am I going to get toxic? And it made me think of the STEC report that you mentioned, where they proved that what they considered extremely high doses of up to 200,000 international units a day, that study
Yeah,
was
for years.
buried.
Hello.
Yeah.
That was you got cut off there. Hold on, I
I
think
was,
I
yeah,
walked
I
into a
was saying
dead
that
zone.
the STEC report, which proved the safety of
Oh yeah,
extremely
200.
high doses,
Yeah.
yeah, that was buried, so nobody knew about it. And so even now, I'm like, no, to get any sort of vitamin D toxicity, like it's so rare, but you would need like 1 million international units or more a
Well, no, no,
day,
no,
and
not
it.
these. Hold on. These days, it can be more toxic than it was back then. In the 1930s, people still had a diet that was full of magnesium and K2, so they weren't deficient in those two things, or zinc or boron, and vitamin A. Those are the cofactors of vitamin D. But if you take a lot of that nowadays, when everyone's deficient in those cofactors, it can trigger deficiency symptoms that they call vitamin D toxicity. The first thing, if a modern person took 200,000 a day, they could easily trigger magnesium deficiency symptoms right off the bat because they're already magnesium deficient, and vitamin D eats up those cofactors really fast. And for K2, it takes like 6 months of high dose D3 to trigger hypercalcemia. But
even
none of
then,
that would
it's not
happen if you're.
even then it's not a vitamin
Oh,
D toxicity. It's magnesium and K2.
no,
It's the missing component.
right. There's no such thing as vitamin D toxicity. That's a old doctor's tale. So everything they call toxicity is simply deficiency symptoms in the 5 cofactors.
I was going to ask you, why do you think the medical establishment would want to keep this from us? But I think we both already know. We all know why.
Oh, yeah. Just keep looking any town in America, probably up in Canada too. They're constantly expanding the hospitals and their bank accounts.
Yeah, not my bank account.
Yeah, so I'd call all these massive hospital construction projects are monuments to vitamin D deficiency.
Mm.
That's what keeps them in business. If people get this news and everyone starts taking 10,000 a day at least, it's going to crash the entire medical industry. The only ones left will be like maybe emergency room doctors for trauma.
Mm-hmm. There's an online
Yeah,
website. I was going to say
the neat thing about this. Oh, go on.
I was just going to say there's a few online health websites that sell 50,000 international unit pills. I wonder how long it'll be before they confiscate them.
Yeah, so they really hate vitamin D, but the secret's gonna get out. But now the neat thing at this winter gene thing, all the diseases that are caused by winter genes, they disappear in people at the equator, and then they get a much higher incidence the further away you move from the equator. So you'll see this like smiley face pattern, like so. Where the bottom of the smile is 0 degrees away from the equator, and then left or right of it is like the degrees latitude north or south of the equator. So it becomes like a smiley face for incidents of everything like MS, autoimmune diseases, and then cancers. And I'm like, every kind of cancer has that same thing, same smiley face pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And so I couldn't imagine the winter gene, like, well, cancer must be adaptive somehow. It must be good for you in the cold. And I thought, that's crazy. How could cancer be good for you? And so I did a bunch of digging, and I said, it has to be good for you somehow and protect you from freezing. And then I finally figured it out, is that in cases of severe cold, your fat cells have very few mitochondria. And those, when they get activated, so they make energy by fermentation in the cytoplasm, and that's a much more inefficient form of energy production. Your cell can make energy 2 ways: one with the mitochondria, or 2 in the cytoplasm through fermentation. The mitochondria can make 36 ATPs, which is your energy currency, per molecule of glucose. Whereas with fermentation, you can only make 2 ATPs per molecule of glucose. So it's very inefficient, but it occurs in the entire cell cytoplasm. So it does add up to something that's significant. And that's what a lot of athletes use fermentation for, like when they're sprinting, and then they finally get a lactic acid buildup, and that's when they can't run any further. That's because they've fermented as much energy as they could, and the lactic acid from that process builds up. So, but what happens if you get in the cold and you want to generate heat in your fat cells, you got to kick on that fermentation form of energy burning. And in that case, it releases like 40% more energy than if you weren't doing it, and that, or 40% more heat. So that is like basically cancer. And then cancer is a cell that only uses fermentation for energy. It doesn't use the mitochondria. So cancer really are cells with broken mitochondria. And then they only use sugar and fermentation for energy. So these fat cells get stuck in this fermentation mode, and that's to generate heat. But then if they don't get out of it, all of a sudden they can turn into cancers. So that's why vitamin D3 actually I'm finding it's curing a lot of people's cancer very easily. And there's a bunch of anecdotes in my book, but one guy just left a review at my Amazon book page for my cancer book. William Munzel, he had like prostate cancer for 16 years, and his PSA kept going up. He had his prostate removed, and then his PSA was at 15 and climbing. The doctors were panicking. Then he started reading my earlier vitamin D3 books, and he started boosting his D3 levels up to like 50,000, 60, 70,000. And now today at age 79, his PSA is undetectable, and he says he's never felt better in his life. So that's a review, one of the reviews on that cancer book page. But
So,
so
so
yeah, so if you don't get this D3 signal, these fermenting cells that are generating extra heat, they can easily switch over to cancer. But then when you get the D3 in your system, it tells those cancer cells to like self-destruct or become normal. And that's why high dose D3 seems to cure almost all cancers. But and then
but a
so
part of
yeah,
that,
so then I'm saying,
so so
huh?
Jeff, a part of that cancer you mentioned is the mitochondria stop working. So there's metabolic dysfunction there. And as we spoke about many times, there's a correlation between vitamin D deficiency and metabolic dysfunction as well. So part of it is not getting the signal from the vitamin D to turn off this fermentation process. And then the other part is the metabolic dysfunction or the mitochondrial dysfunction that's already there because there's vitamin D deficiency already.
Yeah, that could be true. Yeah, because the D3 also repairs mitochondria and helps them become more efficient, along with magnesium. You need magnesium for your mitochondria to work as well, because every ATP that's made in the mitochondria requires one molecule of magnesium. So you kind of need both of them. But if you take the K2, D3, and magnesium all together, that should knock out cancer. And then and it also, the D3 boosts your immune system so it can recognize cancer cells
How much,
better. Because
I was going to say, how much
when you're
K2 do you
oh,
recommend? I know you recommend about 1,000 magnesium, but how much K2 do you recommend?
well, the amounts that I used to get the amounts from the literature. Everyone's using like tiny little doses, like 200 micrograms, which would be like zero point 0.2 milligrams. But in my latest research, I found those are basically homeopathic doses that don't work. And everyone needs to take like 45 milligrams of K2 a day. So that would be 45,000 micrograms. And that when they gave that to women with osteoporosis in Japan, it like reversed it.
Really?
And yeah. So there's a study. It stopped it and reversed it in most of them. So you can even take 90 if you need to decalcify your arteries. No one's ever going to have to get bypass surgery again once they implement this system, because if you take enough magnesium, K2 and D3, your body will decalcify your arteries like within probably a few months, just like during the summer. But if you've got a lot of it, it might take longer. But the entire bypass surgery industry should be destroyed once people start following these recommendations.
Because a lot of the
And
literature that I've seen around K2 is kind of like once you hit 280, 300 micrograms, that's kind of where you hit that point of no return where there's no more positive effects.
well, they're only looking at the K2 that functions in the liver. And once you take much more than that, it spills out of your liver and gets into your whole body. So that's why you need 45 milligrams. And then the K2 goes around with the GLA protein and with magnesium, and that's able to decalcify all your arteries. I had a friend who was taking D3, K2, and magnesium. I told him he had pains in his neck. I said, try this. It should help you out. And he said, yeah, that fixed it. And they went into his doctor like a year later, still taking that stuff. And the doctor did an annual like calcium scan on his arteries. Because I can't believe it. Your calcium's all gone. Because doctors will tell you that, oh, this calcification is irreversible.
Mm-hmm.
And, but yeah, it's irreversible if you follow the RDAs of the Institute of Medicine. And they're behind the low dose vitamin K recommendations also. Those two people that should be in jail, they didn't even differentiate between vitamin K1 and K2. They just said, oh, no one needs more than a small amount of vitamin K each day. But that's another thing that just is boosting disease worldwide, helping their profits.
Mm.
And their magnesium setting is way too low, like 350 milligrams a day. And they know it's too low and they still don't fix it.
Oh yeah, I still see people taking like 100, 150 of magnesium glycinate, and I'm like, that's insane. Not only is it really low, but it's like the mildest form of magnesium you can get. So,
Yeah, and it takes a whole year to reverse your magnesium deficiency because your body and tissues absorb it slowly. And then if they give you a blood test and say, oh, your magnesium's fine, you can tell them, no, doc, the blood test is worthless. The deficiencies lie in the tissues, but you need to take like a whole bunch of magnesium every day for a year to finally reverse it. And then the amount you need to take is just the amount where you get loose stools. Oh, I think we talked about that in the last
yeah, I think it
episode.
was
But
titrate back down to 1,000 once you get the looser stools.
what do you want to talk about? The mental illnesses that from caveman disease?
Yeah, and then I wanted to wrap up what we're talking about right now. In the book, everything we've just spoke about, like with the vitamin D and the magnesium and the K2, like these cofactors. This is in the book, you refer to this as like a way to send your body the signal like, hey, spring, summer is here. So you call this the summer signal protocol in your book?
Yeah, it works for every disease or because all diseases, I mean, they come from different genes being expressed, and but the one thing they all have in common is they get turned off when they get the summer signal, and that's D3, K2, and magnesium in the right amounts.
Is there any other cofactors we're overlooking or we haven't mentioned?
Well, there's also boron and zinc. Boron helps D3 work better. Zinc, it can high dose D3 can eat up your zinc. That messes with your immune system. You'll notice if you're zinc deficient, your skin might start looking weird, like getting scaly. And then a little vitamin A. But those don't, at least in me, they wouldn't kick in for years. If you know the ones that kick in first are right away is magnesium deficiency symptoms. You'll get those right away if you take high dose D3 and you're magnesium deficient. And then, are you still there?
Yeah.
Oh, I heard a beep. I thought my phone was dying.
Maybe it
If
was.
we get cut off, it means my battery died. Anyway, so then where was I? Let's see, D3, K2, magnesium.
Boron, zinc.
Oh, boron and zinc, and then it'll eat up your zinc, but that, at least in my case, that seemed like it wouldn't kick in for years. Oh, and then the next thing to kick in would be vitamin K2 deficiency, causing hypercalcemia, but that takes like 5 or 6 months, at least in most people. Without people, like the only 2 cases I've ever heard of, they were taking like 300 to 600,000 a day with no K2. And it kicked in after about 4 or 5 months. It starts off with you get nauseous and you can't eat, start losing lots of weight. Then you go to the emergency room and the doctors say, oh, you got your calcium sky high, and they put you on IV, and they let you sit there and dilute your blood for a couple of days, and then you get better.
So
So that's it.
I was listening to your book when I was driving the other day, and one thing, you didn't mention this, but it popped up into my head, and you were talking about testing magnesium, and we did mention this before in the last conversation, and how like you can't test magnesium adequately in the blood because it's mostly stored in the tissues and the bones and the muscles, and nobody's doing these biopsies, and I think you said if you could get a doctor that was good enough that might do a magnesium loading test, that might be helpful. But then I started to
Yeah, they
think,
just
sorry, go ahead.
what?
Go
Go
ahead.
on.
Oh, I
Yeah. Just they give you a bunch of magnesium and collect your urine for 24 hours and see how much comes out. If your body sucked it all up, then you're magnesium deficient. But other than that, just you got to look at the magnesium deficiency symptom list, and just if you check off a bunch of things, that's the most easiest and most accurate. Like if you get muscle cramps, twitches, you have insomnia, anxiety, heart palps, blood pressure changes, dizziness. And, there's a huge list in one
in
of
the
my
book.
books
In the new
of
one, actually,
it's like
there's a huge list.
like 3 pages of possible symptoms.
So I was thinking though, when I was listening to you say that, just my mind was kind of wandering to, well, myself and Carol had discussed testing hormones a lot, and like you're almost wasting your time testing hormones in the serum because again, hormones attached to the receptors on the cell, they're in the tissue, they're not floating around in the blood. So unless someone's doing a biopsy, you're not getting an accurate look through the serum. So then I'm like, who came up with this? Was this a big scam the whole time to convince people to just go get a load of blood tests that almost tell us nothing? And even if it was, this is my conspiracy brain, which you'll appreciate. Why do they want so much of our blood? So,
Oh, that's going to Epstein Island. That's they drink that along with their beef jerky.
yeah, it just doesn't make sense because a lot of even iron, a lot of these quote blood tests, they're irrelevant. It's not an accurate picture. So why are we all putting all our eggs into one basket hoping that we're going to get the answers with a blood panel?
Well, some of the stuff is good. So, I mean, it measures your cholesterol and, you know, different things, but some of those items are worthless, like the
Yeah, it just
magnesium for
makes me
sure.
think. Yeah, maybe there's a hidden agenda
But
there.
well, I don't know. I've actually tested my blood for progesterone after I took a lot of melatonin. I was expecting it to go up. I was taking high dose melatonin. That made my hair grow back thicker. So it's basically it suppresses your DHT, which is the bad form of testosterone, because progesterone interferes with testosterone being converted to DHT. So I wanted to see if my progesterone went up when I took high dose melatonin, and I had the blood tested, and yeah, my progesterone went up to like 2 times higher than the normal reference range for men.
Have you
So
done
I
much
know that
research?
so that one works. So some of
Have
those
you
tests work, but
I was gonna say, have you, in all your years of research, have you done much research on like really high levels of testosterone, especially in women, but like n with no
no,
specific reason? Mm.
no, not really.
Do you think
Hirsutism,
progesterone could
how's that?
influence that?
That's something I haven't looked into.
Okay.
But progesterone is a precursor. I mean, you've got the steroid pathway. The first one is cholesterol. Your body converts that first into pregnenolone.
Hmm.
And from there, the pregnenolone gets converted into progesterone. And then from those two steroid hormones, all the downstream steroids are made from, like these enzymes convert uh, into your DHEA, testosterone, estrogen, cortisol. Those are all downstream. So if you have a lot of progesterone, you got the right enzymes, it could just direct it to making testosterone. That's one way that could be happening.
maybe.
That might mean the other enzymes for the other hormones aren't working or something. I mean, that's just my
Interesting.
thoughts on it.
Yeah. Um, so it was something I had discussed with Carol, and we kind of had came up with a few ideas around like ovarian tumors and stuff like that, or maybe adrenal issues. But I was just curious to see if you'd ever came across.
Well, yeah, I mean, actually did think about this. And I made I don't know, somewhere I posed the idea that if you repaired all the enzyme pathways that convert cholesterol into all the different hormones, if you repaired all those enzyme pathways, it should drop your cholesterol. And 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 so if you've got one hormone that's going up too much, if you could repair the pathways that made estrogen or cortisol or androstenedione, there's tons of
Endocrine
steroid
tone,
hormones.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. And then if you could repair all those enzyme pathways, then you wouldn't be making so much of that one hormone that's abnormal. So that's my only thought on that.
Yeah, would make sense. So going
Oh,
forward,
that
you
that just that just got me thinking that the LDL cholesterol goes up in caveman disease, and everyone thinks that's bad. Your bad cholesterol. That's another freezing protection thing. That actually the LDL gets incorporated into your cell membranes and makes them less prone to freezing damage.
Hmm.
And then in the summer, your HDL goes up, and that runs around grabbing all the LDL and taking it out of the membranes and your blood and then disposing of it. So that cholesterol system is actually another freezing protection device. I just thought I'd add that in there because we mentioned cholesterol.
Yeah. And well, vitamin D essential in that. So you have another book you're publishing soon, and you're continuously doing research with the help of artificial intelligence. But what do
Oh
you
yeah, it makes my job so much easier.
What do you think, where do you think the future of research is going? Like, I think in your book, you had mentioned Einstein or Newton about being extreme geniuses. Are they being replaced now with AI? Are we not using, like, I think you mentioned our pathological gene expressions properly now because we're kind of outsourcing everything?
Well, that's kind of what I was talking about. I basically that's getting us into the mental illness picture of the winter gene and why mental illnesses are adaptive.
Mhm.
And once we get through that, we can discuss the genius thing more intelligently, like a genius. No, I'm just that the genius is apparently. I'm poking at the idea that eventually genius evolved as an adaptation trait, and that but the groups that have the gene for genius, they also have genes for like really terrible stupidity. So you get like in groups or families with geniuses or uh, races with a lot of geniuses, they have a lot of mentally disabled people. So
Oh.
it's kind of like you get the wheat with the chaff,
Hmm.
and that explains. Well, I don't know if I should get into this too much, but it's kind of controversial, but it's real. If you look at the IQ distribution amongst races and sexes, they're almost all pretty narrow. So most races and the female sex don't have that many geniuses or that many stupid people. But there's one exception: is the white and Jewish males have a very wide distribution of IQs.
Mm.
So we've got like a lot of retarded people, but almost most of the geniuses are white males. But you probably won't. Most people won't like to hear that, so I won't discuss it further.
Well, it's not that people, sometimes we don't like to hear certain things, but it doesn't mean it's not true. I mean, it's kind of obvious, like I just mentioned, Einstein and Newton were both Caucasians. I don't know if we put
Yeah,
Elon Musk
if you go
into
to
this category. I think he's completely Caucasian.
who?
Elon Musk.
Oh, right, South African, Caucasian.
Yeah, so
But yeah,
primarily
you
Caucasian.
walk down. Everyone blames it on white supremacy, oppression, this and that. But you go down the. I went to the Science Museum in Chicago, and I walked down the Hall of Nobel Prizes, and
Mm.
a picture for each year of the scientists. Almost all white males, like a few Japanese, maybe one woman. I don't know. It's just white male after white male. But you could say, oh, no one else had a chance or whatever. But
Yeah, yeah, but
I
you're
think
saying
genetics.
no, there was a potential gene there that influenced their genius.
Yeah, so that's the end part of my mental illness winter gene theory, which I didn't finish in the book, but I put it out there. I was going to get to it in the next book about how we all evolved from cannibals and where geniuses came from. Probably that evolved during the agricultural period after the ice ages. Anyway, but it's really neat. The mental illnesses all follow this caveman pattern. It explains why boys get autism at 4 to 1 versus girls, and and ADHD at a much higher rate, and why women get some mental illnesses way more than men, like anorexia nervosa, obsessive compulsive disorder, bulimia, and what else do they get? Oh, depression and anxiety. So all the women mental illnesses are basically things that would make her more likely to survive in a cave, living in a cave, in the world of living in a cave. So like anorexia nervosa turns out is caused, or they're always magnesium deficient and D3 deficient, probably K2 deficient. And then what happens when that gene is triggered? Oh, and we got all these mental illness genes from the Denisovans, which were like a different, they call it a race of humans up in Russia, but they call it a different species, but they're actually just extreme races since we could interbreed with them. So they shouldn't call them different species. Neanderthals were human, so were the Denisovans, and just extreme forms of race. And they gave us mutations in the zinc transporter gene inside the brain, and that's associated with all these different mental illnesses, especially on the woman's side. But like anorexia nervosa could be triggered when there's a famine. She still has a bunch of kids in the cave, but she's carrying a baby into a famine, and by not eating, that would actually eliminate the baby, which if she had the baby, they'd both be more likely to starve. So it's kind of like birth control.
Hmm.
She would quit lactating and lose the baby, and that would help them survive. And then she doesn't eat, but that allows more food. She strictly controls calories, which allows her to give all the excess to the children to keep them alive. And the weird thing about anorexia nervosa patients I read, it's like 10 to 1 women to men. But in girls with this disease, they like to play with food and present it to people, but they don't like to eat it. So
Interesting.
that fits in there. And then I thought bulimia, like they gorge and then they vomit. That I originally thought that could be like a food testing thing to see if, but then I started thinking, how do wolves feed their offspring? They come back with a full stomach of food, and then the pups come up and lick under the chin, and they vomit up the food, and the pups eat it.
Hmm.
So possibly bulimia was some kind of wolf type feeding the children response.
That's where
And
you're
then
getting the cannibal idea from?
no, this is pre-cannibal. Um, I think cannibalism arose with agricultural when men moved to agricultural communities, and they were tied to the land. And then they would go extinct if they didn't engage in cannibalism whenever there was a drought or a famine. So the only societies that could survive would have to engage in cannibalism to make it through famines and droughts. And then from there, I think religion might have evolved to make it more easily sacrifice themselves for the glory of God. And there's probably or also in war to be willing to like blow themselves up, so to protect the group. So it kind of, religion helps humans engage in self-sacrifice. And then the weird thing is I had AI, I said, well, look into all the religions. Do they mention it much about cannibalism? And I found that some mentions in all the things, but AI came up with the idea, said, yeah, and Jesus Christ is apparently the last human sacrifice and the end of cannibalism. And then the Last Supper is where they eat his body and drink his blood, but that was bread and wine. And so he was the last sacrifice for humans to engage in cannibalism. I thought that was pretty clever. I never wouldn't have thought of that on my own.
I don't think anyone would have thought of that one.
Yeah. And then on the male side for mental illnesses, you got autism.
No, hold on.
Boys get it 4 to...
Jeff, stop for a second before you go on. Back to the female mental health. I get the anorexia aspect, and I get maybe the depression, seasonal affective disorder, malaise, kind of
stay in the cave.
Yeah, so you just don't have that motivation or energy to get up and go, so that's keeping you in the cave. But what about like other mental health issues like schizophrenia or bipolar or psychosis? Like, is that part of these mental health issues that you're referring to?
Absolutely. I was looking into schizophrenia. Huh?
How would they work then? Like, how are they protecting you? Like, by hearing voices,
well, what do you want to start with?
Keeps you in the cave. Let's just go with schizophrenia. So you're hearing voices saying red rum, and that's supposed to keep you in the cave?
No, schizophrenia affects both sexes equally, and I was thinking it should be exploding along with autism, with the low D3 levels. But the problem is biologists can't figure out schizophrenia because they have a much lower rate of reproduction than normal, and that gene should go extinct very quickly, but it keeps popping up. And it turns out schizophrenics, they talk about the voices, but the main thing is schizophrenics were excellent threat detectors for the group. So they're very paranoid, and so they'll hear something rustling in the wind. Most of the group will think, oh, that's just an acorn falling out of the tree, and the paranoid schizophrenic will go, no, that's going to be a lion. And 99 times out of 100, he's wrong, but it only takes that one time when he gets it right that it makes it worthwhile to have a schizophrenic in the group. And then they
keep
tested
everyone on their toes.
Yeah. So they're always, and they're schizophrenics tend to have insomnia, so they're probably alert all the time. And then the boys get it earlier and worse than women, so it's kind of good for the hunting party. And then the schizophrenics, they played normal people and schizophrenics like a bunch of noise, and they hid some real sounds in there. And the schizophrenics picked out the real sounds 5 times better than normal people. And then they've got this hollow face illusion that shows there's like a mask of an impression of a face, and it's actually hollow going into the block of stone or whatever they made it out of. And it's a well-known optical illusion. Everyone sees a face sticking up out of that block. That's because your mind just does it, because your mind's always like guessing at things. But you can't trick a schizophrenic. He says, "Oh no, that's concave. That goes in. That's not out." And you can't trick the schizophrenics. So schizophrenics see the real world as it is, and their brain doesn't predict what it should be. So that's their one great strength. And so it turns out so if the schizophrenic genes keep popping up, and it stays at a constant rate amongst races, all the different races, at like 1 to 2% or 1% or something, and it never goes down. But biologists think, oh, it should have disappeared a long time ago. So that means evolution is creating that schizophrenic gene in some people for a reason. And it's not individual selection, it's group selection. So groups with schizophrenics would survive a lot better than without groups with schizophrenics. And so they went extinct, and the groups that survived somehow had a schizophrenic mutation generating mechanism in their group gene pool. And that's why schizophrenia keeps popping up and doesn't disappear. And then I looked into the different races. Each different race has a different way to make schizophrenics. Like in Europeans, there's some gene that gets turned on that whittles away the white matter of the brain, and they have smaller brains than Europeans, but that leads to schizophrenia. In Asians, that same gene works a little differently. They end up with bigger brains, and they also have schizophrenia. And then in blacks, it's a totally different set of genes involved with, like, I don't know, immune system, white blood cells or whatever. And that also leads to schizophrenia and the schizophrenia phenotype, but it's completely from a different set of genes. So what this means is convergent evolution. So evolution is selecting for schizophrenia, but in separated races, it does it in different ways. And that's true about almost all the autoimmune diseases and mental illnesses. In all the different races, they're all created by different sets of genes, but it all comes to the same type of mental illness. So all those illnesses were basically selected for because they helped us survive.
Mm. So then that leads us to, well, that makes me think that schizophrenics, they're on high alert all the time, but it's really interesting that you said they see the world as it really should be, which is really interesting. I know a few people who are schizophrenic who heard voices, saw things that no one else could see. It makes me wonder, were they seeing into another dimension? Were
Well,
they
I haven't,
seeing
I
spirits that
haven't
were
figured,
there?
I haven't figured out the voice in the head thing yet, but maybe it's just the subconscious tells them, it's giving them possible warnings or something. I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Like when
But
you
I didn't.
say they're seeing the world as it really is, are they seeing a dimension that we're not seeing? Because they say
No,
we
no.
only see 1% of what's around us every day.
Well, what I read in the research was that most normal people, like, they really they predict what they're supposed to see. Like 98% of what you're looking at is you're predicting what's supposed to be there. And in schizophrenics, they don't have that prediction. They just see what's there.
Hmm.
So, but by having that prediction, that means you can get tricked. Your mind can trick you into seeing something that's not really there.
Okay.
But just because you expect it. That's how the brain works according to AI.
What are the other mental health issues that would be more correlated to men and the winter gene?
Autism has been exploding since 1980, and that's when everyone's been using sunscreen and vitamin D deficiency. And possibly the aluminum in vaccines can also combine with magnesium deficiency to make it even worse. But the real culprit is vitamin D3 deficiency in the mother and the baby. But no one's talking about that. I think if that gets out, that's going to really hurt the medical industry. They're trying to keep that quiet. I was going to write a book on that, to blow the whistle on autism and D3.
Hmm.
But what autism does, it makes these kids hyper focused, and they can really notice patterns better than normal people. I raised an autistic boy from age 5 to 18. And yeah, he had like attention surplus disorder is the way I call it. It's like he could be watching a cartoon and you could yell at him, "Hey," and he won't even hear you. You know, you got to yell at him, "Hey," and then he breaks his concentration and goes, "Oh, what?" You know, so they get locked in, and so they would be great at tracking animals, maybe doing repetitive tasks like making stone tools. And some autistics are fantastic artists. They can look at one thing at one time and take a complete snapshot of it and just draw the entire thing from memory. So they would be excellent, like, excellent with a group that's hunting animals. Like, you could just like instantly analyze the entire landscape. So so they were great additions to the hunter party. So that's why autism evolved. And then there's manic depression. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm listening
Oh,
attentively.
I thought I thought my battery died. Manic depression is equal in both sexes. I'm like, so how does that work? Well, it turns out men get the manic mania a lot more, and the women get depression a lot more. But depression would keep them in the cave when when there's an emergency out there, and the mania is for emergency situations when you have to leave the cave because it's flooding or there's a tribe of warriors coming in. You've got to get up the courage to we got to hike 100 miles through ice cold snow. I can do it, no problem. And the whole group has to get into the manic phase and make that huge migration or they're going to go extinct. So you can't do it when you're depressed. So that's when the mania kicks in. And I found out, I know a girl with manic depression and she loves to travel. She just wants to travel all the time. And then she gets in her depressed phases, but she just travels as much as she can. And then, and so that's manic depression. And then ADHD is similar to autism, except it's not what you think. I had ADHD as a kid. So they think the common idea is you can't focus on anything. But actually it's different. With ADHD, you really get bored with things, so you don't focus on almost anything. But once you find something you're interested in, they can have laser focus if they're really interested in something. So it's kind of a variant of autism. And actually, kids with autism also can get ADD at the same time. But that allows for that's like a real good threat detector in the landscape. Like in the hunting party, like he can look, is that a rock? Is that a rock or is that a lion? And then look over there. Oh, is that a warring tribe or those trees? And so he's just scanning all over and then eventually can fixate when something tickles his interest.
I have a theory. I have a theory on ADHD, kind of what you're alluding to with like all of these ADHD diagnoses that, in my opinion, are just being thrown around between kids and adults. I think it is kind of what you're saying. It's not that these people are bored. It's just that whatever they're looking at or researching at the time or hearing at the time, it's not interesting to them because these people were designed to be builders or carpenters or creative people, which we would have needed in our primal days for someone to build the house or the road. And these people are not supposed to be mathematicians or doctors. They're supposed to be like the laborers. And that's why they're not interested in school or all that sort of stuff that I would argue we're forcing on everyone. Not obviously, we're not all the same. And maybe it is that these people or kids don't have ADHD. They just have this like primal gene that you're referring to that is more of our like builders. We needed people to build bridges, to build houses, to come up with things.
Well, you're jumping ahead to the agricultural society. So I thought it was great for a hunting party and before there was agriculture. And then I found when I was a kid, they would give me amphetamines and that would calm me down, believe it or not. And I would get straight A's at school. and it forced me to focus. And a lot of people with ADHD, they end up, after school, they switch to nicotine and caffeine, and that's their new form of medication to keep their mind focused.
Hmm.
And it turns out speed and caffeine and nicotine, they all act as fake stress. They boost your cortisol levels. So what you're doing is you're stressing the kid with the wide angle lens on his face, and then it's shrinking that lens down to this fake stress makes them focus like they're in danger.
Hmm.
And so that's how those ADHD drugs work.
So I have one more question as we wrap up now, Jeff, and I haven't actually heard you mention this too much in any of the books. Not so much connected to mental health, but more so like emotional health. Have you looked much into like this gene or vitamin D deficiency being connected to either side of the coin, like either people who are like very sensitive and pick up on other people's emotions, or I think more importantly, people who just close off and block off all their feelings and emotions and just kind of run away from any sort of like worry or upset or anything like that. Do you think there's something there with that?
Well, there's two things. I know someone taking high dose vitamin D3 left a review of the book. He said, "Oh, I started taking 20,000 units a day of vitamin D3, and I feel great now, and I got rid of the Prozac because he was depressed." And he says, "Vitamin D3 makes you feel great, while Prozac just makes you feel numb." So he got off his Prozac, started taking high dose D3. But if you have like a lot of anxiety issues or you feel stressed or tense, that's usually magnesium deficiency. So both D3 and magnesium can trigger those those things. But D3 deficiency is more depression triggering, or you can't get up out of bed. And magnesium deficiency is more like anxiety or stress, or you're more prone to have temper tantrums. You can even have psychotic episodes, even die. And there's all sorts of behavioral issues like a fear of photophobia. You can't handle lights. So I don't know about shutting down all the emotions and running away from them. I think that might be a good thing.
Maybe, but maybe like back to what you just said about Prozac, maybe there's a natural internal progress, excuse me, Prozac, that causes people to like block out their emotions and not deal with their feelings, almost like just run away from any feelings. And vitamin D would be helpful if there was a natural Prozac. I don't know why I want to say progress. Prozac that we're making that maybe we're not sure of yet or we haven't discovered yet.
Yeah, well, there's an enzyme that's higher in women and lower in men called MAOA, and it breaks down dopamine. And so it fluctuates in women with their menstrual cycle. It goes up at one time, then it goes down, and it explains why women are much more prone to depression. And
Mm.
then men who have low MAOA, really low, they're really low, they turn into like criminals and lots of aggressive behavior because they get way too much dopamine in the brain. So MAOA stands for monoamine oxidase.
It
So
is,
there's
yeah.
one nitrogen sticking off the dopamine, and it just goes down and chops it off and destroys the dopamine, and it also destroys serotonin.
Well, that
So
enzyme influences histamine, which then also increases serotonin to extremely high levels, which we know are not good. And that's
what?
why that's problematic.
Oh, yeah. So meth, if you want to cut down on your MAOA and not be depressed, you could take methylene blue. That suppresses MAOA. You can also take ibuprofen for depression because I looked at the chemical structure. They don't say it, but I can tell that it's got the exact structure that will suppress MAOA.
You can also
And
take a DAO enzyme and you can take SAMe and a few Carol talks about betaine as well and creatine can help as well.
Yeah, the things that suppress MAOA, they have a molecular shape that looks like vitamin B2, like with two or three six carbon rings all together,
Mm.
and they that's normally the enzyme that powers MAOA is vitamin B2 stuck to some other stuff, and it clicks into the MAOA enzyme and gives it energy. But the ones that act as, and then that goes on to destroy dopamine and make you depressed. But if you replace that vitamin B2 FAD enzyme with something that looks like it in the same shape, it clicks into the MAOA gene or protein, and it doesn't give it any energy. So then it stops breaking down the dopamine, and then your dopamine goes up and you feel happy.
Yeah. So well, dopamine, maybe that's a whole, you should do a book on that because I think not enough people are aware of dopamine because for so long they were shouting about serotonin from the rooftops, convincing everybody that serotonin was the holy grail, just like estrogen, and while overlooking dopamine and not kind of making people aware, like I mentioned, that high levels of serotonin are actually really problematic. So anyway,
Oh
that's another
yeah, well
conversation.
this MAOA, it increases dramatically with aging, and it actually goes way up in your heart, like 400%, and can trigger heart failure.
Hmm.
So it's really bad after age 50, and then it goes up about 30% in women's brains during menopause, and then it's got another similar enzyme as MAOB, and that has no function. You can knock the MAOB gene out in mice and they develop normally. They're just a little less stressed.
Hmm.
But after a certain age, MAOB skyrockets. Like in humans, it goes up like 400% in your brain and triggers Alzheimer's, goes up in your heart, goes up in all your tissues. And they eat up the mitochondrial energy by, by eating up that FAD enzyme. It just sequesters it, and your mitochondria needs FAD to make energy. So these two enzymes go way up to eliminate your mitochondrial energy, and it causes all sorts of aging-related diseases. Same with CD38. That eats up the other enzyme called NAD, which I'm sure you've heard of.
Hmm. Yeah.
So CD38 destroys NAD. NAD makes 40% of your mitochondrial energy, and FAD makes another 40%. So when you CD38 and the MAOA enzymes both skyrocket, then all your mitochondrial energy gets destroyed with aging.
Hmm.
And the first antidepressant they came out with was called it was an MAO inhibitor, but the first one, oh, it was supposed to be a chemotherapy or something, but they found out everyone taking it got in a good mood. So that was the invention of the first antidepressant, was an MAO and A inhibitor.
Hmm.
And then they created one called Deprenyl or Selagiline. When people take like 40 milligrams of that a day, it suppresses both MAOA and MAOB like dramatically. And they did tests with rats and beagles, and they gave them like relatively high doses of MAOA and inhibitors, but Deprenyl, but at higher doses it inhibits MAOB also. And the rats and the beagles were like living 40% longer when they were taking this. So I've been taking Deprenyl for a long time.
Was Fau was your friend Fauci doing that test on the beagles?
No, I don't want to think about his horrifying tests. They should
So
do the tests on him.
maybe they will, or maybe they are. So
Yeah,
final
they should
message.
cut out. They should cut out his vocal cords, tie him down in the desert, and let sandflies bite him to death.
I feel like you've thought about that too much.
No, I mean that's supposedly he funded studies that did
I
that
know with
because
the
they
dogs, yeah.
needed they needed to catch the flies, and they just put beagles out as bait. Just horrifying.
Mm.
I think Trump is outlawing a lot of this animal research, which is good.
So, final message, Jeff. You in the at the end of the book, you say that for people, your freedom from disease depends on whether you choose to believe the medical establishment or the evidence right in front of you. So, what is one thing you want the listener who's currently suffering from hibernation syndrome or hibernation disease, like diabetes, depression, everything we spoke about, what do you want them to know before we wrap up now?
Well, that your doctor's not really your friend. I mean, they're not, most of them don't know that they're involved in this conspiracy, but they are, their money is dependent on your suffering. They do not make money from cures. So it's weird. Like, there's this Facebook group for that disease, what, primary sclerosing cholangitis. It's an autoimmune disease, and doctors say it's incurable, and they keep treating people for this autoimmune disease that your immune system attacks the duct from your pancreas, the bile duct that goes to your pancreas to the liver, and eventually everyone needs $1 million liver transplant. So I joined all these PSC groups, and I'm saying, no, the guy just emailed me from England. He tried my high dose D3 technique, and he said he had it for 8 years, and within 3 months he was completely cured, and all his tests were normal. And so I set up a Facebook group called PSC Can Be Easily Reversed, and blah blah blah. And I put his email in there, and links to my book, and I go into these PSC groups, and I say, dude, they're like, oh, I'm getting ready for my liver transplant, and I'm telling everybody, no, you don't have to do it, just go over this thing. And almost nobody, there's like one person that has started this protocol, or one or two people. There's like 130 group members, but nobody believes it. They all believe in these doctors that are going to make $1 million off of giving them a liver transplant. And some of these PSC groups must be run by doctors, because they won't allow me to put the posts in there. So just keep that in mind. The doctors drive fancy cars for a reason, and
So
there's
you
no
said
money in a
that group,
cure.
you said your group is PSC can be reversed.
I think it's PSC easily and completely reversible or something.
Okay.
It's something like that.
Do you
And
think
then
that would be relevant for autoimmune hepatitis as well in the liver?
it works for every autoimmune disease. So yeah, the guy that cures his PSC, he also had Crohn's disease. They usually occur together. That's where you get scarring and bloody stools in your colon. It's a terrible disease, and that cured his Crohn's also. I could make a group for any autoimmune disease and say easily and completely reversed. MS, what else? Lupus, psoriasis, you name it.
Hmm.
Oh, and I figured out psoriasis in my next book. I didn't look at that in the Winter Gene book, but that thickens your skin, and that's like more frostbite protection.
Interesting. I guess vitamin D really is the holy grail.
Well, and with magnesium and K2. Don't forget,
And progesterone.
at the proper doses.
Hmm.
You can't listen to your doctors. They're giving you the wrong information for your health. They're giving you information that makes their business flourish. They don't realize it, but that's coming from the top down. Whoever teaches them in med school, those are the real conspirators. You got to figure out who put that in the curriculum for all the doctors, because they don't know what they're talking about. They think they do. In fact, my dad was a Stanford MD. You know how you can tell a Stanford MD?
Go on.
You can't tell them much. They think they know it all, but they don't know anything.
Okay.
But most people, they're just going, oh, the doctor in the white coat on TV, Dr. Welby, I gotta trust my doctor because I can't think for myself. So that's what everyone has to do, is think for yourself. Your doctor is not your friend.
Well, that's a
So
perfect
that's
way
it.
to I was going to say that's perfect way to wrap up the conversation, Jeff. So your new book is The Winter Gene. For those of you in Canada, you can get it on Amazon. I'm sure it's the same in the States. Anywhere else you want to direct people to, Jeff? We already mentioned your YouTube channel, which is Jeff T. Bowles, and you've become quite the AI DJ there.
Right. Well, that's got some different interviews and radio. Like I was on public radio in New York City and some syndicated shows that the tapings of those. You can listen to that, or you can listen to my songs about cancer, COVID, or the sunscreen scam. I'm going to do a new song on heart disease. And then there's some other ones like I had AI recreate a Beatles hit
I saw
and a
that.
Beach Boys hit. And then there's some other ones. My most popular song is The Long Ride Home, about a guy that finds this old dog in the street, and it turns out it's his old lost dog from long ago.
Oh.
So that I guess that rings true, or hits the emotional bone of many dog owners who've lost their dogs.
Hmm.
But and then I've got a website, Jeff T. Bowles. That's no spaces. Jeff T. Bowles, BOWLES.com. That's got tons of blog posts, and you can search for the things you're interested in. And it has a Search D3 Cures search engine. I've compiled like more than 1,000 testimonials of people doing their own high dose D3 experiments.
Hmm.
And you can just pop anything in there like acne or psoriasis, and then you can review all these people describing what happened when they took a high dose D3. In fact, high dose D3 actually cures acne too, when
Hmm.
Accutane didn't work in this one kid.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Okay. Great. Well, we'll have you back when the Cannibal book comes out. I'm sure that'll be interesting.
Yeah, and it kind of might explain what's going on Epstein Island. I think there are
That will be
genes for
extra interesting.
there are genes for cannibalism, like people that want to engage in it because they did allow them to survive back during famines and droughts. So
That's
it
bizarre. When do you
possibly
expect to
possibly
release
went.
that?
I don't know. I'm working on other stuff one of
Mm.
these days. But yeah, so like, but I'm thinking like somehow when you get to positions of very high power, possibly they start seeing the little people as different, and somehow that triggers some gene that then makes them want to engage in cannibalism, because that's how ancient communities would have had to survive famines and droughts. That the people at the top would have to figure out, yeah, we're going to start eating these people, and they'd have to enjoy doing it, I guess.
Mm.
So there must be a gene in there somewhere. So like it must have flipped on in Epstein and Ellen DeGeneres. You heard about her.
Mm. Yeah.
She used to make baby dumplings, they claim on YouTube.
Yeah.
So,
And
uh,
Hillary Clinton's fun escapades.
oh, the adrenochrome. Yeah, I always thought that was a crazy, stupid story, but it could be true.
Apparently, it might be somewhat real.
Yeah, and then
Maybe these
oh, and they
people
talk
need
about
more vitamin D.
yeah, or a death sentence, or they could cannibalize each other.
Oh,
So
Lord. Yeah, the conversation could go anywhere.
yeah, I guess that's enough of that. All right.
All right, Jeff, thanks for your
Well,
time. That was entertaining.
all right, take it easy and talk to you later.
Thanks a lot.